Trimming any kind of shape that has a taller, narrow opening like this always provides a bit of a challenge, unless of course you have the right bit of kit to make that trimming easier. It's a chuck in this instance, a tool that I make myself in-house and keep wrapped up in plastic for moments like this when I have a slightly more complex shape to trim. By the way, if you'd like to watch how I threw these pieces, I'll leave a link on screen now and in the description below that show that entire process, from the amount of clay I used to some tips on centering and how and why I preferred some of the shapes as compared to others. And yes, like a few of you pointed out, I do now sort of see the resemblance to a cocktail shaker. I just hope after trimming and refining these and then glazing them, they lose that resemblance. I dried these bottles upright overnight with some plastic wrapped around the rim section to stop the neck from drying out too much, which would have definitely happened if I left them upright, as the walls here are much thinner and there's a lot more air circulating around them. At this point though, the bottles are pretty much the perfect condition to trim. If anything, actually they're a touch on the firm side, so I'm going to keep them wrapped up to completely halt the drying process. This trimming really is one of those processes where you have to try and catch the clay in this perfect condition. If the clay is too soft and you trim, the process becomes more difficult, and if the clay is too hard and you trim, it's difficult, but in another way. And thus I think one really important skill when learning how to become a potter is knowing how to judge the clay, to figure out when it's best to trim it, when it's best to leave it out longer, and when it's best to then cover the clay so it doesn't dry out any further. For many of my one-off pieces, once trimmed I place them on these HPL bats, which stands for high pressure laminate. They aren't necessary whatsoever, but it means once trimmed they're placed on a completely smooth, flat surface, and therefore the bases of these bottles aren't subtly marked by wood or plastic, which can embed itself into the still relatively soft leather-hard clay. For me, as I create quite carefully trimmed and finished pieces, this is quite important. But if you are making work that's naturally more rugged in appearance, or you're working with a particularly grogged clay body, then this isn't so much of an issue. I like to keep my chucks leather hard. Therefore, they're wrapped up in plastic and are kept in this airtight box, and before using them and after using them I normally dip them in water. This way I can perpetually keep them leather hard. Now, you might notice with this bottle that there's a bit of movement in it. It wasn't this noticeable after it was thrown, which leads me to believe it was dried unevenly from one side overnight, which is entirely my fault. To rectify this, I'm going to try and trim the base flat, and obviously yes, the way to do this was in the chuck, not balanced and pinned in place in the insanely precarious way I was doing it before. By trimming the base flat on this piece, I'm essentially nullifying the undulation that exists in the rim. The difficulty is, if this piece has indeed dried out unevenly from one side, like I imagine, the bottle has literally leant in one direction, which means that probably no matter what I do, there will be some movement in this piece that I have to try and overcome during the trimming process. This is something that sometimes works, but often doesn't, as the way to resolve it often means trimming away more material from one side of the pot than the other. If there's a reasonable amount of clay in the pot, then you can get away trimming away a fraction more material from one side than the other, but if the walls are relatively thin, then you can't really get away doing this. I'm going to begin trimming these by attaching them upright onto the wheel head. I do this by brushing slip onto the base and then I tap center it into the middle. With a pot that does have some movement to it, you'll never quite be able to get it perfect. So in this instance, you can see that the rim section is spinning slightly off center, but the body is more or less there. In any case, when a piece is wobbling like so, as soon as you stop the wheel, you cease to notice it. And typically I try to work around it, as in the long run, provided the pot is finished to a high degree, nobody is going to notice. At the same time, it is of course a handmade pot, which means that some degree of irregularity can be present in the object in my opinion. Of course though, this depends on the overall aesthetic, and of course the level of craftsmanship the object is finished with. I collected a fair amount of Japanese pottery when I lived there, and a few of the bowls and cups I have clearly have some movement in them. The rims aren't perfectly round, and some have distorted in some cases, dipping on one side and not on the other. But, on the whole, I can tell that the pots were thrown and trimmed with an extraordinary amount of care and attention, despite the subtle flaws that now exist in the piece. In order to trim this piece back into a shape that spins true, I tried to hold the blade very steadily so that it carves through the excess that spins around. Essentially, I remove more clay from one side than the other until it spins true all the way around. And with these angular pieces, I put more care and attention into getting where those angles change direction right. As if these begin to waver up and down rather dramatically, it can give the pot a sort of curved appearance where those marks are. This is beginning to feel much better, although you can see clearly that the lip section isn't perfectly straight, but that's fine by me. It's also where these angular changes are, where you have to be the most careful about making them too thin, as with these shapes the interior form will be more curved than what's on the outside, especially after it's been trimmed. And if you aren't careful, it's quite easy to make thin spots where these angular changes are, which when it happens can result in one part of the pot simply tearing off, as the clay is now paper thin. When this stoneware is a touch on the firm side, I tend to smooth over the surfaces with one of these steel looped turning tools, as it just creates a really smooth, burnished surface and gets rid of any of the more prominent chattering marks that may be present. And it's here where I noticed exactly what I've been telling you about. I trimmed the section just underneath the neck too thinly, creating a crack on one side, which means that this top piece is just going to tear off. Well, it could be worse. I think there's still enough clay in this section, perhaps, for me to be able to trim it back and to create an opening that's akin to the bud vase shapes I often make. Now, as balancing this piece on its rim and securing it in place would be an absolute nightmare, this is when having a chuck that's this shape is so useful. By the way, if you'd like to watch a video that's all about chucks, and how this particular shape was made, that's a topic I've made a much more detailed video about, a link to which I'll leave on screen now and in the description below. Essentially, the pot is inserted into this chuck, it's centered, and I'm looking to see how flat the bottom is in the mirror that's in front of me. Or you can simply lean back to get a better side view of the piece, or even get off the wheel and crouch down if that helps, both of which though are things using a mirror negates. The reason I'm speeding through how I finished this piece is because when I lifted the vase up to adjust it, my thumb simply sunk straight into the wall as I had turned the bottom too thin. Or, as I was turning unevenly to begin with, on purpose I should add, so that it spun true. This created a thin patch on one side of that tapering lower half, resulting in, well, a ruined piece. And it's another really stark reminder to dry pots properly, carefully, slowly, and most importantly, evenly. Thankfully, the bottle I ruined was the shape that I didn't like quite as much, which means the vessel I'm left with is my favourite shape. It has a flatter shoulder and a longer bottom half, and on the whole I think it just looks a bit more elegant as compared to the previous shape that was perhaps a touch too squat. This piece dried much more evenly, and therefore it spins around without the inconsistencies the other piece had. I'm going to be a lot more conservative when trimming this piece, and whilst it certainly doesn't feel heavy, the vessel felt balanced, and I know that I can remove some weight from the entirety of the walls from top to bottom. As these bottles are on the firm side, it means these tungsten carbide tools do leave a slightly chattered surface. The blade vibrates slightly as the pot spins around, creating a sort of bumpy texture. This becomes exaggerated when the longer portion of the blade is used, so if I do feel like it's happening particularly badly, I'll trim using a smaller portion of the blade, as this way I can apply more pressure on a smaller point, which means less overall force is being applied to the pot. I suppose there's less resistance when using a smaller portion of the blade, so often when I trim, I'm leading with the sharper point of the trimming tool. That's where my focus is, and I let the rest of the blade trail thereafter. For instance, here I'm applying the most pressure where you can see that curl coming off. I'm not using the entire length of the blade, just that small sharp section close to where the hook is. Then, when I reach the top and change the direction I'm travelling, I switch again to using the front portion of the blade, the tip. This is an interesting thing to think about, as when I'm using different shapes of turning tools, I'm not just thoughtlessly pressing the length of metal against the pot. Instead, I really consider which portion of the blade will do the best job. With all the exterior walls trimmed, I now need to go back over the form to remove the subtle chattering marks you can see. This process of neatening the shape up is essential, and it starts at the rim, which I lightly dampen to soften the surface, and then I burnish over it. This compresses the coarse particles of sand present here, and eventually it'll help the glaze that's coated over this settle into a much smoother, more even layer, as otherwise it could feel quite rough to the touch. Next, I scrape over all the exterior surfaces with a sharp metal rip. As this is pressed against the outer surface, it scrapes away the highest point of that uneven texture, and I continue until I have a lovely smooth and flat surface. I even sponge over the exterior form, as this helps to knit the surface together, removing the tiny pock marks and craters that cover it, which again ultimately will help the glazes that coat this settle into a better layer. This means it takes less time to tidy up after the glaze has dried out, which is a huge benefit. I've kept this chuck leather hard for more or less a year at this stage, and the reason I like to keep them leather hard is that once dipped in water, the surface can become slightly tacky, which means when the pot is pressed into the opening, it's held in place just that much better. I normally tap center the chuck, and then I even tap center the pot in situ, looking for the base to be entirely flat. I secure the chuck in place with 3 lumps of clay, and then, in order to pin the pot down from above, I use a spinner tool. Yes, you can just use your fingertips to do this. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I find with the spinner, I can apply much more consistent downward pressure, as without one, your fingers are just resting on clay that's spinning, and often this can be enough to influence their movement, thus causing you to lose your grip. I normally find when I flip a pot upside down that I can more clearly see the shape on the lower tapering half, and there's usually some part of it that has to be straightened. At the same time, during the process of flipping the pot from the right way up to being in the chuck, like this, there's a moment where I can feel the weight of the vessel, and thus if it does feel a touch heavy, I know that I'll be able to turn away more after the pot has been inserted into the chuck. In order to trim the very bottom, I obviously have to remove the spinner. So for this section, instead of applying downward pressure with that tool, I'm either using my fingertips or the blade itself. But it is something you have to apply, unless of course the pot is really jammed firmly into the chuck, which I never think is a particularly good idea, as depending on how dry and thin the walls are, that can distort the shape of the pot itself. After each pass, I press down lightly with my thumb just to check the thickness. If there's absolutely no movement at all, even when pressing hard, then there's likely quite a lot of material you can still take away. What I'm looking for is a thickness where the base just bows inward ever so slightly. If it really bends inward with just a small amount of pressure, then of course you've trimmed it too thin. And at this stage, and with the clay at this state of leather hard, if you make a hole in the bottom it can be practically impossible to fix, thus changing whatever it is you were intending to make into a flower pot. It's this section that I burnish smooth, that I stamp with my maker's mark, and for a shape like this I only tack it in gently, as I don't want to distort the circular shape of the foot ring itself. And with that, that's this bottle more or less complete. One of the only downsides about using a chuck is that often the piece gets covered in the tiny burrs of clay that fall into it, so I quickly centre it, blow the worst of these off, and then I'm going to scrape over and sponge the entire surface, just to make it very neat and flush all over. But you may find where the piece was making contact with the chuck, your pot might be slightly scuffed or damaged, so make sure you pay close attention to that part. Do you know what? Maybe I've just been looking at it for too long, but after being refined, it doesn't really look too much like a cocktail shaker anymore. Perhaps it's the narrower foot that's doing it, but either way, I think I'm happy with this shape for now. It will change a lot once covered in glaze that turns a starkly different colour. The next step for this piece is to let it slowly turn bone dry over a couple of days, and then it's going to be biscuit fired, glazed, and then reduction fired. The good news for all of you is that I'm coming to the end of my current making cycle. This means that not only will I have a few shop updates coming soon, but I'm also going to be moving on to glazing and firing much of the work you've seen posted on my account over the past couple of months. This means there will eventually be some more videos that show the entire process from beginning to end. It also means I can see the results of some of the clay tests and experiments I've been running, which I really can't wait to see. Anyway, here are the 2 bottles that I ended up with, and again I think I prefer the taller shape on the right as compared to the slightly more rounded, squat version on the left. The final, most important thing is soaking the chuck and wrapping it up in plastic. This will keep it leather hard for the foreseeable future, provided it's wrapped up really well. I like to place the chuck on a sheet of plastic, and then stuff the excess tightly inside it. It's then placed back into my chuck storage box, and this is shoved in a damp, dark corner in the workshop. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Apologies for the slightly short videos over the next few weeks. I have a few external projects that are keeping me out of the workshop, details of which I'll be posting over on my Instagram account. Regardless, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you next week.